All right, everybody, so welcome to a quick trimming demo session here. We have a couple of cups that we made the other day during our demonstration in class, and so I thought I'd go ahead and trim these while they're leather hard and give you a few ideas. Again, remember, we're leaving a really healthy amount of clay at the bottom of this pot. I probably have like a good ½ inch of clay. If you don't know how to see, you can put one hand in and have your tip of your fingers on one side and your other fingers on the other side, and that'll give you a sense of on the bottom here, and you'll get a sense of how thick that pot is. I'm working with about a ½ inch of clay, which is really ideal for my purposes. And so we're gonna go ahead and trim this tumbler. One of the first things I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wet the rim of this pot, and I'm gonna also wet the wheel head, and that'll allow it to stick for the trimming purposes without it moving too much. So I'm gonna take the sponge and just wet it here. Another thing that you can do is you can look at the wheel head itself, and as long as your pot is symmetrical, you'll be able to see that there's lines on this wheel head, and you can center your pot, or at least begin to put it in the right position based off of those circles. You can put your circle, the rim of your pot, in the middle of that circle, and that should get you close to being centered. Okay, so I'm actually gonna just rest it on here and not actually press it down to create a grip yet. I want to actually begin to center it, which might be a little difficult because this I'm accustomed to being able to control the wheel head from my foot pedal, and in this case I have a handheld sort of device to control the speed of it. So what I'm doing here, personally, what I like to do is I like to put my finger on the side of it, and as my hand moves, if my hand is moving at all, I know that that place where my hand is moving, my pot is too far towards that side. So I can sense right now that my pot is definitely moving. And so I want to go ahead and get it to be a bit more centered than it is right now. So the fast speed really shows me where that off-centered is. It sort of really exaggerates it, but I'm gonna have to have it pretty slow to stop the wheel head at the point in which it's off-center. Okay, so I can tell right here is about the part where my hand would move. So I'm gonna slightly shift this pot over, and then I'm gonna restart the wheel and see if that helps me. Okay. Another way to tell if your pot is off center is to go ahead and make a mark with your wire tool. And if you look right above, if you look from above at your pot, you'll see that this circle is slightly off center, ever so slightly, meaning it's thicker over here and thinner over here. So if that's the case, that means that this pot needs to shift a little bit over towards the part that's thinner. And that will, that should resolve our issue with the pot being a little bit off-centered for the purposes of trimming. Let's see if that works. I think I moved it over too much. So this is a bit of a process. A lot of different potters have different ideas on this. Some people will do sort of the tap method, which is they'll have their pot on the wheel, and they'll continue to tap it whenever the pot is too far in one direction. So generally speaking, they'll do it with their right hand, and they'll see the pot is moving, and then they'll keep tapping it consistently, and that consistent sort of tapping will allow the pot to go ahead and get centered. Now, with that method, it's not gonna work too well with this because I wet the pot, and so the pot's not gonna be shifting that much when I'm tapping it, was sort of the purpose of that. Okay. Okay, now I have this pot where I want it at, and because I wet the lip, I can just push this down ever so slightly, and that's gonna create a grip to make sure that this pot doesn't come off of the wheel head. All right, so I'm ready to trim. Personally, what I like to do, for the most part, I use your standard tools that come in your pottery toolkit. This is the small ribbon tool. And so I'm gonna go ahead and show you my approach to that. So I'm gonna get this really close, which is one of the nice things about doing this on video, is that we can actually hover over what we're doing. Okay? So I'm gonna go ahead, I generally start with this side of the tool, and I'm gonna mark where I want the inner part of the rim of my foot to be. So I'm gonna go in at an angle here. You know your pot is at a right consistency when you see the leather hard parts of the clay sort of peel off like a chocolate would off of a block, okay? So once I make that mark, that's when I switch over to the round part of this tool, and I'm gonna start at that edge where I just made that mark and slightly move towards the center. So that helps me to dig in here, okay? And then the next thing I'm gonna do is go ahead and delegate how far I want this foot to be on the outside. In this particular foot, I want to actually like make a little angle here, and it gives it a really sort of like elegant aesthetic, very similar to a goblet or a wine glass, without having to make, you know, two sections. I can sort of like really have this sort of like flared stem foot. The other thing I want to pay attention to is the angle of this. I don't want this to be flat. I want it to sort of like have a little bit of an edge. One of the reasons why is because then this corner here can easily get caught up when you're bisque firing it or afterwards, and that edge could easily get knocked off, okay? It happens very similar to like when you're stubbing when you stub your toe on a like a piece of furniture in your house, something like that. All right, and then now I'm gonna use a slightly bigger tool. This doesn't come in your pottery toolkit, but these are very inexpensive. This particular one is made with Kemper tools. And I really like using my Dolan tools as well, which I'll sort of talk through in a bit here. But I really like using these tools because it helps me to like guide the shape. These tools are perfectly symmetrical, so if you're like leaning your tool against the side of that pot, it's gonna start to take that shape. So I trimmed away some of the excess, but now I actually really want to get into having a smooth transition, what I deem as a smooth transition here. So I'm gonna use a larger lip tool that has the exact profile and curve that I want here. So this tool here, I'm gonna rest it. I will usually start sort of trimming at the very sort of edge of my foot and move that down. It's very important not to just like trim in one area and leave it there. You wanna like start trimming and then like really transition it into the rest of the body of the pot. I tend to like go ahead and trim all the way down, like even if I'm not actually like taking off any excess clay, just as I would when I'm pulling, even if I'm pulling just one section of the pot, I'm gonna go ahead and guide my hands throughout the rest of the pot in order to ensure that I am creating a nice smooth transition, and I'm really sort of like treating the pot like one fluid shape, one fluid angle. All right, so now I'm getting to the point where I want to be done with this particular trim. So one of the things I highly recommend for you is your fingers are a really great way to burnish this foot. So I'm just gonna go ahead and press down on this clay and really compress all those particles. It makes it like really nice and leathery, and it's far less likely to chip off if you really round this edge off and pay attention to it. It's a really nice way also to use the wheel head and the fact that it's already spinning to go ahead and begin to burnish this if that's to your desire. I'll show you one last quick trick. So you can use really any piece of plastic. I'm gonna use just like a piece of plastic that I ripped off of a product that I just purchased. But really a bag at Walmart, anything like that would work. So I'm just gonna wrap that around my fingers as so. You wanna make sure it's really tight so that it doesn't just like fold in and mess up your pot. So I'm just gonna rub that along, and just doing that alone will begin to burnish your pot and really create sort of a smooth surface. For me, I don't try to burnish too much. One of the reasons why is because I don't like what it does to glazes. I really like my pot to be really nice and porous, to accept the right amount of glaze that I want. So I'm really doing this just more so that I know that this pot is as smooth as I want it to be. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and take this pot off of the wheel head. You saw that it wasn't moving at all. So it's just gonna take a little bit of a tug. You don't wanna peel it right off, okay? And then when I take this off, I'll notice that there's a little bit of, sometimes there's a little bit of gunk or something like that on the very rim. So I'll just take my fingers and rub it across here to really ensure that the rim of that pot is nice and smooth. So there you go. Here's the ceramics tumbler trimmed and ready to go ahead and bisque fire.